Good morning again, and thank you for joining us. This is Mark Morris with Word of Faith Fellowship, and we're so glad that you're listening to our program. Today I have Robert Lowry with me, and he's going to share actually part 3 of his testimony. If you have been listening, you may remember Robert shared part 1 and 2 of his testimony, and it was very powerful. And if you did not hear it, I would encourage you to go back and listen to it if you would like to. On our website, we have all of our radio programs. They're actually videoed. You can go to our website at wordoffaithfellowship.org, and you will see a radio program link. You'll have to scroll back. These are all chronologically in order, and you'll scroll back and you'll see the title, which would be Vietnam Veteran, Professional Bowler, and Gambler Finds Jesus, something to that extent. And so you can find that there if you'll look for that title. And this is going to be part 3 of Robert Lowry's testimony. And so, Robert, I'm going to ask you to pick up there on that night when you're walking around looking at the heavens and don't know what to do.
Right. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Jim, for having us. Yes, that was quite a traumatic experience. I had never felt that kind of presence in my life. And so when I got out of the car at home, we had 10 acres of land. I just started walking, looking up. I didn't know what to do. I knew everything in my room in that house was evil. And I knew the presence that I just came out of was no evil in it. So I had a decision to make. So what I was doing is walking out there and just, I need help. I don't know how to do this. I know nothing. And he kept reaffirming to me in my heart, you don't need to know anything. I do. You just follow me. I'll lead the way. And so, okay. So I went in, and I went into the room, and it was terrible. So I had to get a big bag and unload a bunch of stuff out of there and trash it because it was evil. And in the morning, my parents are always up early. My dad had a business on the property. And so I went up to explain to them why I was up that time, because I never was. I always would come in late at night, sleep later, and go work later. And so they wondered what was going on. So I got to share with them. And the way they took it was, okay, it's okay. He'll be all right. They didn't know what it was really. So they were fine with it. Okay. So I knew I had to go to work and tell my partner, Frank, and the people there at the work that I was no longer, I had it in my heart so strong. I cannot gamble. I cannot do this to people anymore. So I went there and I told Frank, I need to talk to you in the office. So into the office we went, and I shared what happened with me, with Jim Pittman, who they knew, and they just sat there amazed and wept, started just crying, because it turns out all of them in that room, there was 3 of them, were formerly, with the Lord or in church or, doing that, which I never did. And so they said, this is a miracle. And what happened from that point was we began to all agree together, we're stopping this. And I said, Jim, I called Jim, and he said, yes, you can come to my little church, the church he was going to at that time.
Jim was the young man who prayed.
Jim Pittman.
Told you God wants you to follow.
Right. See, we would know where to go at all. So he said, yes, you can come. And so we went. During that week, we got things corrected, the best I could, and had to tell my team members that were gamblers and bowlers that I was no longer going to gamble at all. And what I had to do was, the season was almost over. This was in April. The season ends into May. So we had a month left, to finish up the commitment that we had made. And so that's all I did. I did no gambling. I was there with the team to make sure we finished up. And I used it, actually God used it through me for a time to share my new testimony with a lot of those other bowlers in the league. And they were all just like, this was amazing, you know. Some it really affected, and they really let me know that it changed them. And so at the end of that, in that church, there was a young lady up there singing in the choir who ended up down the road becoming my wife. And I want to say this because for those out there listening, I had made vows and said things in my heart that were so evil. I will never be married. I will never have children. I will never be bogged down with all that. That was me. That was terrible. And my mother used to say to me, there's nobody would have you. I said, Mom, you don't have to tell me that. I know it. I planned it that way. I don't want anybody. So this was awful. This is the way I was living. And so when I went in that church the first time, the Lord spoke to my heart, that same voice said, pray for her. So I did. In my heart, I did. And then the next week, we come back for church. She wasn't there. So I asked Jim, where did she go? And he said, well, they started another church. She was in a group of pastors that had been kicked out of their churches for ministering, too strong, hitting sin, really, dealing with sin, and they told them to leave. So they were praying together as a group and believing God for a church, and they started it. So that's where she went that Saturday. Next weekend, she was in the new church they started. So Jim told me I wouldn't go there because they're kind of different. They're strange, etc., etc. And I said, well, where is it? And he told me where it was. And in my heart, I knew I was to go there. I knew I was. And so I told Frank and the salesman and his wife, I think we should go to this church. And they said, okay, we do too. And so we went, and we became a part of that church in the end of things. And it was a precious time in my life. And I ended up being able to, through the pastor there in that church, be a friend with Marcia. She had no friend, on that side of a boyfriend or anything like that. So I became her friend, and I would pick her up sometimes and bring her to the prayer group. We prayed 2 or 3 times a week, which was great. And one night I went to pick her up, and Marcia had some rough experiences in her life, so she had prayed one morning or night, whatever it was, God, if he's the desire of your heart for me, loose his tongue. In other words, something's going to happen here because she's not going to get involved in a wrong relationship. And so she prayed that. So I picked her up. We were going to the prayer group. We were driving. And I couldn't believe it came out of me. I just said, without even thinking, Marcia, I love you and I want to marry you. And she said, yes! And I went. I was shocked that it happened because you got to know when you do what I did, it's terrible what you have done to yourself to make that kind of vow that you'll never do this. And so God delivered me that night, that day. I mean, it was so powerful. And we went and told the prayer group what God had done. They looked at us and said, yes, we knew this was going to be right. And they said, because you're no spring chickens, we're not going to drag this out. 90 days later, we were married. And that was such a blessing to get married to Marcia. And it changed my whole life. Was being changed by God. I knew nothing about how I didn't date, none of that. So I didn't know anything. So Marcia had to be, she worked with me, just okay. She wasn't upset with anything. So our relationship, was really good through that time. And we knew we were called to the ministry. We both knew it. We knew we were going to be called to the ministry. We didn't know how it was going to happen or anything like that. But she had some knowledge about a Bible school in Oklahoma and Tulsa. And I knew about, just from books I was reading, about one in somewhere in California. I can't remember where it was. But anyhow, so we were weighing those out in our heart. And Marcia said to me one night, she said, I really believe it's Oklahoma. And so our pastor of the little church that we joined, unbeknownst to him about that, he invited a guest speaker to our church one night that was from that Bible school. And it was great what he shared. And I looked at her and I said, you're right, it's Oklahoma. So we knew that's where we were going to go to Bible school. She was a full-time teacher in the public school system, and I had, was with Frank in the business. But Frank was really wide open to it. He said, yes, go, and he moved into a gift of the Spirit that he became very prophetic, and he had a word of the Lord for us before we were going to go to Oklahoma for the ministry. He said, you will be there 2 years, and at the end of 2 years, you will go to the Tidewater area, which is Virginia. And after a season there, you will go to the Midwest, and it'll be like Iowa or up in that area. And that's what he had from the Lord. And those words were so powerful. I learned over the time, Frank and I had a relationship incorrectly for a number of years. But then when we both got into God's family and started serving God together, we had a new relationship. It was like spirit to spirit. It was so precious how God did that. And I could never be any more thankful in my life for God doing that with him and his wife and myself. And then, of course, included Marcia. And so we went. We packed up. I'll never forget the day we were pulling out of the driveway, going to Oklahoma to attend Bible school. My mother just said, help, I don't know what they're doing, but let them go. She didn't have no idea. Never been in church, So we went there to Bible school, and we were there the first year. All it was a 1-year school. But during that 1 year, they announced we're going to become a 2-year school. So we are asking if any of you want to be in the first 2-year class. Of course, Marcia and I's hand went flipping right up right away because we'd had that word of the Lord. You're going to be there 2 years. So that was a confirmation in our heart. God had a hold of us. So we attended the second year, and through different things that happened there, it was time to graduate and go on into the ministry. Well, the ministry there was trying to lead us one direction. Go over here. They really need help. And I looked at them and I said, we can't do that. We have in us a very prophetic word that we're to go to Tidewater. And we're going to go. Well, who are you going to go to there? We don't know. He knows. That's how we lived, He's doing this. So we left. And we had one man's name that owned a car dealership. And, of course, we didn't know it at that moment, but I've forgotten there was large ministries there in Virginia Beach.
Yeah.
Virginia Beach. There's, Pat Robertson, there's Rock Church, there's 2 or 3 real large ministries there. But that wasn't where God was sending us. He was sending us to see this man. And this man said, when we got in the office and had a meeting with him, he looked at us and he said, you know what? You're an answer to prayer. My friend, who used to be a car salesman, got born again, started a church, and he said, they really need your help. They don't know all of what they're doing, So he said, I'll call him. You go over there and tell him God sent you here to help him.
Where was that? What city was that in?
Virginia Beach.
Virginia Beach.
And it was called Open Door Chapel. And the pastor's name was Fritz Stegeman. He was a former car salesman with this. That's why he had us go to him, you know. It was so God. And so we went, and they took us in immediately. Said, oh, yes, we need help. We need all kind of help. So we ended up being in the ministry there, doing youth, children. I preached some. We did different things. And there's where we met a young lady named Brenda, who's here with us today in this church. She was precious. She helped us. She worked with us. Everything we were involved with, she was a part of it. And we really got to know her and walk with her a lot in the Spirit. And it ended up, God bonded us together. I mean, when we had it to leave, it was time for us to leave Virginia Beach. And the next thing we knew, we were to be in the Midwest, like the Iowa, that area. All we had was to go to Des Moines. And we told Brenda about it, that we were going to go, and we were going to go to the next thing God wanted us to do. And so we went to Des Moines, Iowa, and there was a restaurant there and a bookstore. We stopped in that bookstore, and it had a poster on the window. Meetings in Fargo, North Dakota. And it had a name of a former teacher at Rhema, at the school. So we said, oh, we got to go there. So we knew why we went to Des Moines, so we could go to Fargo. And so we went to Fargo, North Dakota, went up to him at the meeting when we got there, and told him, I said, Jim, we just believe God has sent us here to see you. Yes, we'll be a part of the meeting, but we just feel like it's you we're to talk to. And he said, well, what are you doing? I said, we just left the ministry in Virginia. We know we're to be in a ministry up here. He said, good, because we need a pastor up here. And it ended up Minot, North Dakota. So we went up there, started that church, was there 5.5 years. It went well. People loved it. God said, now it's time for you to, now we were here in ourselves. It's time for you to go on. And so we joined a minister back in Oklahoma. We were in his church for over a year. And that's where we were meeting Sam and Jane. I had met Sam at Bible school and invited him up to preach in North Dakota. He come up there and preached. And we knew Jane, not as much as him, but we knew Jane. And so from there, after we were there a year, we just knew we were to go on, start another extension of this church. And so we weighed out the different possibilities and the different things that were available, and it ended up being Crystal River, Florida. They needed help, so we went there. And that's where we started having some people from the church here. We came to the seminar here from there. Came up to the seminar, had some people from the church here come down, minister at our church down there, and we started being connected with Word of Faith here. And it was so good. And then as we were down there one day praying, God spoke so clear to me, you need to move up there and bring all the church that will come with you. And so we did that. I announced that. And out of that, a number of them came. And we all moved up here to Rutherfordton. And we're part of the church here. And it was like we knew we needed help, Marcia and I, in being able to help get people's lives changed. We knew there was something we didn't have that they needed. We could give them the word, but we needed to go beyond that. And it was here. We felt it here. We knew it was here. I'll never forget the first time we walked into the old building on 221. And Marcia had been having some problems with migraines, headaches. And she went in there, and Jane come up, and Marcia was telling her something about it. And she prayed for Marcia, and the power of God came, and it was so powerful, and she's not having a migraine since. I mean, that was such a miracle. And so knew we were home. But this was where we were to be, and the people that came with us, some of them are still here. And during this time, Brenda, who I talked about in Virginia, had joined us out in North Dakota and was a big help to us out there. Then she went to that Bible school, and she ended up, when we got here, she wanted to come here. And she's here today. Mark knows how well
Right.
she's here today. And so she's been a big blessing here at the church.
What year did you actually move here to Word of Faith Fellowship?
1987. 1987, we moved up. We were coming up before that. But in 1987, we moved up. Some of our members started moving up, and some of them are still here. Some didn't make it, some did. But it was so God. We knew we needed in the Spirit something more in our lives and for their lives. And it was here. God said, it's here. And you're to be a part here. And I've become a part of this church. I've worked in this community. I've worked over 20 plus years with Mastercraft and Cone Jackard. I've known a lot of people in this community. And I want to tell all of you, you know the truth. We have been nothing but a blessing to you. And they know that. This community loves us. And I said, we always will be there for you. And then, of course, I ministered for the church. I'm an associate minister. I do prison ministry. I can go to the hospitals, take people to the doctors, go home visits, preach whenever God says, share, lead prayer, do different things like that. Just be in my place as a blessing here in the church.
And you have been such a blessing, you and your whole family. Of course, you
Sons.
brought your sons here, and they grew up in the Christian school.
Yes.
And we've actually had one of your sons on the radio
Yes,
program, Jonathan,
yes,
who is
yes,
a dentist,
dentist.
and he shared. So what a powerful testimony, Robert,
Yes.
and an amazing life that you have heard from Robert Lowry. It's amazing how here he was in Michigan all those years ago and did not know anything about God and
Nothing.
was just consumed with bowling and
Yeah.
gambling and this whole life that he had until one day when God came down to him. And I love that when you share about that experience and you're driving in the car and there's somebody else
Yeah.
with you there, because
Oh, yeah.
isn't it amazing that
Yeah.
in the midst of, even though we live our lives sometimes just aimlessly apart from God, God's watching us all along. He has a
Yeah.
plan for us, and
Yeah.
He is trying to get to our heart, and He does
Yeah.
all kinds of things to get to our heart. So you have heard a wonderful testimony, and we thank you for listening. Again, this is Word of Faith Fellowship, and we are sharing with you the wonderful things that Jesus has done in our lives. You can go to our website at wordoffaithfellowship.org and hear all of our radio programs. We've been doing this now for 11 months, and we have many testimonies that I believe would encourage you. We are here Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 8:30 to 9. We hope that you will continue to listen. Thank you.